If everybody could take a seat, we'll start the meeting. Welcome everybody to the February meeting of the North End Neighbourhood Council. You have surprised and delighted me. When I saw all that snow, I thought we were going to have nobody in the room. So this is wonderful. So for those of you who are on Zoom, we've got a full house here in person, as well as the people who are joining on Zoom. And we'll also be recording the meeting and posting it on our YouTube channel, which we didn't get done last month because our IT maverick was out of the country, but we're going to get it posted at the end of this. So welcome everybody. We're devoting most of the meeting to the issue of the urban forestry program. But before we get there, under announcements, I'd like to welcome Irina, who's going to give a quick update on Porch Fest. So Irina, would you like to come up? Camera's there, so you have to speak into this. The camera's right there.
I didn't realize I was going to be first, but happy to do it. I'm Irina. I organized Tacoma Porch Fest just outside of here. Cool. I was going to ask, have you heard of it? Porch Fest has been going for 3 years down in central Tacoma. I've heard from lots of folks all over the city, especially in this neighborhood. Why can't Porch Fest come to my neighborhood? Well, it's happening. This year, I'm expanding the Porch Fest festival zone to north of 6th. Cool. And I need your help. I need you to tell your neighbors. We need porches. We need porch hosts. We need bands. We love to feature bands from the neighborhood. And so I haven't opened the applications yet. I haven't announced the date yet. I'll tell you that it's mid-July. But it'll be coming out soon. And we need volunteers. That's pretty much what I'm here to say is we're expanding, we're coming to your neighborhood, and I need your help.
So how do people contact you, Irina?
Yeah, how do people contact me? So you can catch me here. I'm happy to share my digits or my email. TacomaPorchFest@gmail is the best way. That only goes to me right now. So you'll definitely get me. And so if you're interested in, especially if you're interested in volunteering, we need all sorts of things. Not all of them involve sitting in a chair in the hot sun for hours. Some of them are spreadsheet things and making a website and calling businesses, things like that. Let me know if you're in a band, sign up. If you're not in a band, you have 5 months to start a band. Yes.
So what geographical area are you interested in
Up here.
visiting? Like how far down?
Yeah.
6th and how far away from 6th?
Yeah, and so that's one of the things that I really could use help on figuring out what makes sense for this neighborhood. I live south of 6th. I know my neighbors really well. I know I don't live that far off of 6th, honestly, but I'm just not like up in this space as much as I am down here. And so I need some help figuring out like what makes sense. So yeah, if you have any thoughts, like south of 6th, South 12th creates a really nice cutoff. And then I can say, well, I have the cutoff here because I don't want people crossing a busy street, which is actually the reason that I do it. Here, there aren't as many busy streets like that. You have to go like, I don't know, maybe to 21st or something. That's too far. So yeah, I could use some input on that. If anyone wants to grab me here, I know I only have 2 minutes, so we can't have a big discussion. But if you want to just email me, TacomaPorchFest@gmail. If you're concerned about Porch Fest coming here, it doesn't bring a lot of people to the neighborhood. Let me know that too. I want to make sure that I'm making it not, I don't want to complicate people's lives. July. I do have a date, but I haven't released it publicly. I can tell you later. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Irina. And Danielle, one of our board members, has self-volunteered as being the board contact with Irina and Porchfest. So if Irina isn't here, Danielle will be giving updates and she'll be twisting the board's arm into what she wants to try and achieve. So thank you. That's exciting. We have no secretary or treasurer this month. I think they're both online, but they're not here in person. So we're going to pass over those and go into the liaison reports. And first invite the police up. And Devon, can you come and fire up there? Looking at our meeting structure, we reached out to the various liaisons, and Kristen came back to us, and we said that we were interested in statistics, and lo and behold, they came armed with statistics. So I think we're just going to throw up the 2024 one, and let you speak to
The one
that.
that you emailed you.
So.
Hand it off to Luke here.
So can we ask anybody who's on Zoom, are you seeing the presentation?
Oh, they can't not mute.
Okay.
They should be able to.
All right, for those of you who have not met us, I'm Officer Luke Wallen with the Tacoma Police Department. This is Officer Kristen Brazil. We're the two CLOs for the 2 sector of Tacoma. So just briefly hitting on some of these stats, and we're going to get with Peter to see what you guys want on monthly or quarterly and what stats you guys are interested in. But overall, so as you can see in this gray box here, this is a January to December, so it's a 2023 compared to 2024. So in the North End Neighborhood Council area, which is a dark blue box there, 2023, there's 1,974 offense summaries, which means reported crimes. And then in 2024, that was reduced approximately 300 to 1,652. So that's a 1-year snapshot. I also went back and did a 5-year. So in 2020, there was 2,100. So in this 5-year period, there's been a reduction of 500 crimes reported in the North End Neighborhood Council. And comparing that to citywide, in 2020, there was 25,000 citywide. In 2024, there was 25,000. So the city overall has maintained for the last 5 years, while the North End Neighborhood Council has seen a reduction of approximately 25%. So the other thing we frequently get asked about is the stolen vehicles, as the Kia boys were very busy. So in 2020, there was 2,000 stolen vehicles in the city of Tacoma. And then in 2023, it was 6,000, so it tripled. And now we're in a downward decline, where in 2024, there was 3,000 stolen vehicles. So you guys are probably feeling that in your monthly vehicle insurance payments, as that was a direct effect to those stolen vehicles. But it dramatically increased through 2022 and 2023. Now we're seeing a decline in that. And there's many reasons for that. There's been many felony arrests made of known associates of the Kia boys, not just for stolen vehicles, but homicide, robbery, aggravated assault, and other various felony crimes associated with those members stealing the Kia. So the other thing that I wanted to hit on was staffing. Next month we'll have a full staffing report and the hiring through 2024, but it looks like we broke even. We started 2024 with 25 or 26 vacancies, and we ended the year with 25 vacancies. And we'll have a breakdown of non-commissioned, commissioned hiring numbers and a little further in depth for next month. So any questions on those stats? And like I said, Peter's going to get with you guys, and he's going to kind of guide us on what stats this group is specifically looking for and how frequently. But we just wanted to give you an overall for 2024 and compare that to 23, and then even a 5-year to kind of give some perspective to it.
So even though these stats are available to you all, if you're anything like me, saying they're available and seeing them as different things. So we are going to try and post these on our website. So if you're looking for specific items, reach out to us and say, hey, we'd like to see that information. Then at least we've got like an IT guy to pull this down, and then we can post it up. I even tried to send this out because they sent it to me this afternoon, and the format that they sent it to me and how we distribute stuff is different. So we're working on all of those different items, but thank you so much. This is great. And I think our plan is quarterly to look at the statistics. So we'll be getting these statistics out, and then every quarter we'll be saying, wow, why does this look so good? Or why doesn't this look so good? So any other question? Okay, question.
Oh, yeah.
This gentleman right here.
Thank you for showing us these. So I was curious about the morning, afternoon, and night. What hours are included in the morning, afternoon, and night?
So that's a good question. When we have this open, it breaks it down, but I know the afternoon, the question was, looking at here, what hours are morning, afternoon, and night? I know afternoon is 1 p.m. to 9 p.m. So I would assume it's the 8-hour chunks broken down, 3 8-hour chunks. So I know afternoon is 1 p.m. to 9 p.m.
Yeah, just a couple of technical questions, simple ones, I think. Out of curiosity, like when you have 6,000 vehicles stolen, is there a predominance? Are these SUVs? Are these older model cars? And then the other thing is, whereabouts in the city is this occurring? Or does everybody just leave their cars, keys, or them?
So the question was what type of vehicles were getting stolen and where from? From 2,000 vehicles stolen to 6,000 vehicles stolen is a direct reflection of all those Kias being stolen and Hyundai. So there's a specific years and models of Kias and Hyundais that can be started with a thumb drive. And the youth of America took advantage of that and stole many vehicles. And it was everywhere. It just parking lots. I mean, they'd go to the Westgate Shopping Center, anywhere, apartment complexes, anywhere, the mall, where there was a odds of finding one of these Kias is where they would target. The jail parking lot after they were released. So the 6th Avenue,
You laugh, but it's true.
the 6th Avenue shopping center there right by Raymond Hall. So there was no one spot. It was just where cars, parking lots that were busy and had lots of cars in them, typically where they went.
And it wasn't just the city of Tacoma. It wasn't just the city of Tacoma. It was countywide, King County, statewide, and it spilled over into various other states as well. So it was a huge online following that started with these Kia boys, and they just ran rampant with the whole thing. So it was kind of literally everywhere.
Do you want to just give an update on the change of the chief of police, or?
Sure, I can share what I know. So I'm sure most of you guys maybe know or don't know, but Chief Avery Moore retired, and it was effective today. So we are just waiting from the city to hear who we are going to have as our interim chief. So we don't have any real information about that. I know that coming up here, I think at the end of the month, the crime plan that Chief Moore had put into place, I believe is kind of coming to an end. It's wrapping up with the contract of who we had with the analysts and things like that. So the city is starting to do some more proactive policing emphasis. Those have been going on for several weeks, if not a couple of months now, I guess. And those seem to be going really well. So they're doing both North End and South End proactive policing emphasis, and making a lot of contacts and a lot of arrests on various things, misdemeanor crimes, felony crimes, drug use, things like that. And so it's not a lot of information that we have today, but as we get more, we'll definitely be happy to update the group. So, but that's kind of where we're at right now. Questions? No, good, good. All senators?
So a big round of applause for the police. Thank you so much for everything that you do, and we do really appreciate your outreach to us. So again, if you don't feel comfortable going to the police directly, you can always come through the North End Neighbourhood Council. We provide some anonymity. Do we have, can you look on, do we have John from Public Utilities? Sometimes he's online. See. John from, no, looks like we don't have PUD today. So Pot, Alyssa.
Here. Here, present. Oh, come on, that was funny.
I'm just being silly. Yes, I am Elisa O'Hanlon Regala, and I am with your Parks Tacoma. That's probably the biggest headline. Is for years we've been known as Metro Parks, and now we are Parks Tacoma because a lot of people didn't realize all the things that are included under the umbrella of your park district. A lot of people didn't know or don't know that the community centers we operate Meadow Park Golf Course, that we own and operate Northwest Trek, that the zoo is part of the park district. So people think of their neighborhood parks, so we led with parks and naturally in Tacoma. But our aim is to help people understand the breadth of resources that exist through your special parks district, of which our president of our board is here, as she often is. So, which is a good segue into your park district is governed by a 5-member board elected citywide, but we recently experienced 3 vacancies. And so one of those vacancies was filled by Elisa Lee. It's hard for me to share names. And this Friday actually will be a special meeting of the board to consider appointment for the 2nd vacancy. And I'm trying to make sure to balance my laptop.
You can move this one.
Okay, I wasn't sure if I could move that one. Cool, fantastic. All right, that's better. And then after the 2nd vacancy, the board will move forward with filling the 3rd vacancy. So we should have a full board back in place by end of March. Is that right? Thank you. Okay, so then just a few other things that I wanted to bring to your attention. Again, on this point of Parks Tacoma, I had my notes all right in front of me, and then the screen went dark. They're back. Okay. So on this point of the breadth of services that Parks Tacoma provides, I just want to remind folks, of course, this is Black History Month that we're in. There are a number of activities throughout the month, many at the People's Community Center. We are working with, you may have heard that the city has probably heard some cities had some strain on its budget, so we've been working diligently to fill in and provide for senior services. So we have a greater array of senior services and activities. There's a whole bunch of things I could read off to you, but really in the interest of time, I encourage you to check out the Parks Tacoma website. And because maybe you don't even know of some unique activities, like if you're an outdoors person in this time of year, there's an avalanche awareness clinic. So just to underscore the variety of things that you can learn through Parks Tacoma, I really encourage you to take a look at the website and keep up with what's happening in your Parks Tacoma. Any questions?
And Josh from the fire department said that he couldn't be here, but he's online. So let me see if we can unmute him and he can give his. I think you,
Can you hear me?
Josh?
Yep.
So Devon?
Is it not working?
We can,
Test.
yeah, we can't see him. Oh, just, yeah, right now you're a thumbnail in the top of my head. So let's see.
I'm usually pretty small in most people's books, so.
Great.
That's good. Myself here, I'll make it. It'll be even better. There we go.
Perfect, Josh. We can all
All right.
see you. So fire away.
All right. Well, hey, good evening, everybody. Like I said, usually like to be in person, so my apologies. It is my goal to be there every month and in person when I can. Unfortunately, I was unable to this time, but couple things I want to put out there. Last month, I had shared with everyone that Tacoma Fire had started a whole blood program that started January 23rd. Just wanted to report back that we've already given our first unit of blood successfully, and actually probably made quite a bit of a difference in saving somebody's life. And so that is really good news that to see that working actually in our community already. And it was not trauma related like most people would probably think. This was actually medically related. We thought the first one we'd see would be trauma as well here at Tacoma Fire, but it ended up being medical related. So as far as data goes, I didn't know we were doing data, but it's funny enough, if you've ever been on Tacoma Fire's Facebook website, if you have Facebook, they actually listed just today, actually their calls or some data just for January alone, and this is the whole city. And I can get granular if that's something that you guys are interested as well, and just report on the North End neighborhood. That's definitely doable, but it takes a little bit of time to kind of get that page built out. But data overall for January, we've had 429 fires already in the city of Tacoma, 3,635 medical calls, 506 other. And when I say other, you're talking like hazardous material type stuff, technical rescue, elevator rescue. There's some other variety of things kind of thrown in there. So total for the month of January, we're looking at 4,570 calls. So we are moving and shaking. And then just the last thing I'll kind of leave everybody with, it is this week is actually National Burn Awareness Week, February 2nd through the 8th. And so kind of with that, I just wanted to share just a few things, some call to actions, if you will. So talk about like kitchen safety. I'm going to be kind of your safety guy. Make sure we're turning those pot handles inward. It's definitely when you have kids around, but even as adults, right, as we move and we're doing things in the kitchen, it's easy to bump those kitchen handles and have them come down and cause burns, and which then leads to injury, obviously, and we want to try to avoid those. This is a collaboration effort with the community, so the more fire education we can get out there, the more we can partner and keep everybody safe. Also bathroom precautions. So, and I should say kitchen as well. So look at your water heater. Most of those are trying to be preset around 120 degrees is going to kind of generally prevent any kind of those burns. And then sleeping areas, extinguish candles before you go to sleep. And then here's one that a lot of people don't think about, but get used often as those electric blankets or heating pads. Make sure when you do get those, or if you're using one, that you have an auto shut off feature on those, because those do cause fires. We see that, I don't want to say super commonly, but it does happen. And of course, a lot of times they end up in tragedy. So we want to try to avoid those if possible. And with that, that's all I pretty much have to report. Sorry, once again, I'm not unable to be there. Is there any questions that anybody has for me?
Yes, we have a question from Council Member Rumba.
Yeah, hi, could you just tell us, Josh, what the difference is in the call volume from last January to this January? Is it the same or down or?
You know what, this may take me just a minute to pull up, but I can definitely find that real quick. I have to log in. Is there any other questions while I kind of capture this?
Nope, I think you're under pressure.
Under pressure.
And
I work well under pressure typically.
as I said, we are going to be doing statistics with the police department every 3 months. So perhaps we'll work with Josh to put them on like every, they're on the 2nd month and the 6th month or something. So we'll work out on that. And then while he's looking, those of you who have one of these wonderful agendas, don't Jody and Georgette did a wonderful job this time of putting in extra information. So don't just leave it on your seat. Take it with you because there's lots of stuff that you can refer to and websites that you can access and call people. And that also is the same stuff that we send out to that distribution list, which is the MailChimp distribution. And if I'm assuming that everybody who's either in the room or on Zoom is getting those emails from us, that's why you're here or that's why you're on Zoom. But if you're not, it's very easy to get added to that list on our website. So that's how we work that out. How are you doing, Josh? Did you find it?
Well, unfortunately not. I'd have to do some math because it breaks it down by shift. And then it does it like in a week period each time. So I'd have to add up like 24.
Okay, but Sarah's got a comment for you.
So Josh, I'm on the Southbound 911 board, and actually, 911 calls have been down. And, we know they're down because we can tell from the data or what people are calling in that it's actually, that we see a downward trend. So, which is good.
So Sarah tried to give you a
Fire prevention.
question to win brownie points and you failed miserably. But apart from that, thank you. A round of applause for Josh.
Take care, everybody.
And city manager's office. So Christina, and then I'm.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I'm Christina. I just have two quick items for you tonight. I know everyone's excited to talk about trees this evening, so I'll be quick. First, I just wanted to share that our Tacoma Creates program is accepting applications now for funding that supports programs and events that are run by a nonprofit organization whose primary purpose is to advance arts, culture, heritage, or science. That funding is, you can find more about it at the tacomacreates.org website. Applications are due on March 10th, and this is for events that'll take place July 1st, 2025 to June 30th, 2026. So anybody involved in a nonprofit that wants to apply for some great funding for your events, please take a look at that tacomacreates.org website. This news came out just after your meeting in January. So some of you may have already heard this news, but just wanted to make sure that you are aware that our city manager, Elizabeth Pauley, has announced her intention to resign. She will be resigning on July 1st, 2025. So the city council is starting their discussions about a potential interim city manager. If there's any questions, I'll hand it over to our council members.
Okay. So next item is the city council members report. So Sarah's just disappeared. There she is. Do you have anything to give us? You're not part of the presentation, but do you want to give a? Well, you've got a cookie in your mouth. You're 0 for 2.
Hi, Councilmember Rumba, District 2. I'm really happy to be here tonight because this conversation about trees is one of my #1 things. And we will be talking tomorrow at study session about trees. And this is going to the IPS committee, the Infrastructure Planning and Sustainability Committee, and to make sure it didn't get buried there without other council members having an opportunity to explain and express their concerns. It is coming to study session tomorrow, so you'll get to hear from myself and several other council members about their concerns and what they want to see in our tree plan. And we'll be talking specifically about non-development areas with trees, and that's because we took that out of Home in Tacoma too. So we have regulations on development and trees, which is exciting. We also have right-of-way ordinance. And so we also have some critical areas that we do, like the Schuster Slope, where we have regulation for urban forestry. And then there's places that aren't regulated. And there's nothing, protecting those trees and requiring certain trees. So the conversation tomorrow will be a really great opportunity at noon to hear from council. And also you'll have the opportunity to listen in on the IPS committee. They meet, John, when do they meet? The second and fourth Wednesday at 4:30 p.m. You can find the information online and you can listen to the meeting when it's happening or afterwards. They're always recorded. I have people who send me little snippets of when I wasn't on council. Make sure you listen to this part of this meeting. This is really important. So I wanted to just say that. I also wanted to remind you that I am on the Crystal Judson Family Justice Center board. Sexual assault and domestic violence are things I really care about, and we have seen an increase. We continue to see an increase in domestic violence in Pierce County. And so I think it's really important that you know that there's someone sitting on our council who cares so much about this issue. There is a domestic violence commission that meets every first Thursday online on Zoom at noon. If you're at all interested in the information, I can get that to you as well. And those are just some really simple things I wanted to bring up. But thank you so much for being here, and I'm really excited about this conversation.
Any non-tree related questions for Sarah? Yes, Jeff.
Sarah, do you know when the zoning maps are going to be available for Homer Tacoma that show the parcel level details like, you know, so.
Well, I think the code just went into, go ahead, Mike. They should, because it was February 1st, was, yeah.
And final tweaks, hopefully we're going to get, they should be applied.
So
Okay.
it was February 1st that it is enacted, that it went into law. So I was thinking that, but I don't want to say that for sure. That's not the case.
Okay.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Oh, Kit has a question for me. Thanks for the tour with them going to we went to the telephone museum. It's open on Thursdays. It was fabulous. If we didn't know, we have a telephone museum here at Tacoma. You've been there? Oh, it's really cool.
Yeah, what you want to do if you go to that museum, allow an hour and a half, bring your grandkids or skip the grandkids, just go and enjoy yourself.
So kids saying you need an hour and a half to go through it, and they have volunteers who come and work, who come and take you on the tour, and they used to work there, so it's very cool.
Yeah, good fit industry. So the question is, it just occurred to me, the city council is going to start looking to study for an interim acting city manager. Why aren't they starting with looking for a city manager?
It's such a good question, Kip. Why aren't we? You know, I would like us to be looking for a permanent city manager, but it's been decided that we're gonna go ahead and look for an interim because we wanted to give the new council next year the opportunity with the new council members and a new mayor, the opportunity to pick the council, the city manager that will be there for however term they decide. So, but I agree. I never liked the idea of an interim, right? Because it feels right now with everything that's going on in our community, in our federal government, at the state level, knowing we have a structural deficit, having someone who can steady the ship, as I like to call it, I know gives people some sense of semblance of things are going to be okay. I just want you to know that I agree with all of you that having someone that we know is going to be there, that the council's chosen would be the best choice. This is the second best choice. And hopefully we're going to find some good people. I think this is a hard time to look for somebody with all of those things going on, right? But we'll see what we find out. I hope if you have questions about it, I'd love to talk to you. And I know that Councilmember Hines cares as much as I do. He's like one of the smartest people I know in this room. And he's like my partner in crime. And we don't really do crime, but he's a person I really respect. And he's who I talk to when I have issues or questions about things. So. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah. And perhaps if the interim person does a fabulous job, they become the regular one. And,
right, there you go.
And if everything's we hear about, there's going to be a lot of good people looking for jobs because that's from the federal government. So, now we'd like to welcome John Hines up. We're going to devote most of the rest of the meeting. In fact, we can all of the rest of the meeting to John. I think we sometimes get accused of being tree-centric at the North End Neighborhood Council, but it is a really important subject, and we're going to
allowed John, I guess this is like the first of the community outreach meetings on this subject, correct, John?
You asked first, and I'm.
And the,
Running Sam on camera.
Yes. If I can control a thing for since I just know what it's
oh, we need to just check Devon that they can see.
Yeah, I'm working on it.
I think we can just go between slides and check the chat if they're seeing it.
Let me see. I see the issue. It doesn't like. That's not true.
Last night we had to do it as a share screen rather than a.
Yeah, let me swap.
All right.
Sorry for the
Ladies
delay.
and gentlemen, just a minute. So again, I'm John Hines, Council District 1. Councilor was still here, she I'll be back. Okay, good for her to give an update.
There it is. Now it sees it. There you go. So you can just.
Yeah, advanced funds.
Oh, that's
Days of the high
Zoom.
school history teacher right here, just going through the PowerPoint slideshow.
There you go.
All right. So, good evening, everyone. Thank you again for having me. I know I come in regularly to just do my update, but today I'm talking a little more formally about our upcoming discussion on tree preservation for non-development sites. The reason I'm here to talk about it today is I'm one of the members of the Infrastructure Planning and Sustainability Committee. So, during the home-to-home process, the issue of tree preservation non-development sites we pulled out of home-to-home process and sent to IPS for further discussion. So just to give a little update on where we are around trees and that, and then what I really want to do more than anything, kind of hear from some of you. I know I've heard from a lot of you. I know the North Neighborhood Council has been really good about sharing their thoughts about trees and tree policy, but I have a couple of specific questions I kind of want to ask tonight. I really want to be in listening mode as I go into the conversations around the IPS or around IPS and tree policy that I can then share with some of my colleagues. Let's see. Okay, so the overview of what we're going to talk about here real quick is I want to do a little recent kind of overview of recent city council actions, then talk about the next steps for the city council, and then I have some questions for the people that are here. So a couple of things. So a couple of highlights, some recent actions. So one that was leader on and really proud of is looking at developing an urban wood reuse program assessment and action strategy. So trees are sometimes removed. Sometimes they're removed by choice. Sometimes they're removed because they've broken infrastructure in the way and they're a hazard. Sometimes they're removed because they're diseased. And when trees are removed, what can we do to make sure more of those trees stay out of the landfill and get put to productive uses? So the program we brought on in, Cambrian Carbon is the name of the consultant, right, Mike? So Cambrian Carbon is a consultant, and what they do is they kind of do a state analysis of kind of trees in the city. Trees are removed, potential markets for what can happen if trees are removed that could be different than just land chipping them and landfilling them. And so they're going to be coming on board here this year and give us some ideas about how we can divert wood from the landfill and be used for better and higher purposes. Something I was leading on with council member Walker signed on to it with me. She's been really interested in the deconstruction part of the demolition conversation. I've been really interested in what we can do about trees. And there's lots of really cool cities across the country that are doing really innovative and new things with trees and trying to put them to a higher, better use than landfilling them. And I really think Tacoma could be a leader on that. Another thing that we've done recently, and I wish I had my water right here. Is part of Home Tacoma. So prior to Home Tacoma, we had very limited standards around tree planting when it came to new development. We had a landscaping code, but what Home Tacoma did was kind of make that even more robust. So we have new tree planting and retention requirements as Home Tacoma. So as development happens, there's new requirements around planting trees and also retaining trees on site. And there's also some requirements around climate and native planting requirements that are part of Home Tacoma. So though we we've moved the conversation about non-development sites to this IPS process that's going to be coming and starting in February. Home to Home had a lot of things. So even though we're going to be adding more housing, we're going to be planting more trees than ever here in the city of Tacoma. And then just some highlights from the last budget cycle. I've been here talking a lot about some of the budget issues we've had, some of the crunches and hard decisions we've had to make about the budget, but there have been some good things if you're really interested in trees. Number one, we added construction arborist position for environmental services, capital project tree planting. So Mike can probably tell me more what that person's gonna, what's the role of that person, Mike? That's right, this is Mike Carey. What's your official title, Mike, again?
Urban Forest Program Manager of the city.
All right.
I was told I have to speak into the mic for folks online.
So, Mike Carey, Urban Forest Program Manager here at the city for the Environmental Services Department, but really the city as a whole. So this position specifically is to help assist with capital construction projects for the city. So when we have new pipe replacement projects where we're tearing up roadways, maybe you're replacing sidewalks, a lot of times those improvements might be in conflict with trees. And a lot of times the easiest solution is, well, we have to put this pipe here, therefore that tree might have to go. This position in particular is going to be able to assess construction methodology and the existing trees to make sure that we can have the best of both worlds. So that we can try new construction methods to save the trees, maybe tunnel underneath roots, maybe bulb out a sidewalk around roots, but to do the best we can as a city to lead by example and show that we can actually save trees while constructing new projects. Perfect. Yeah, so it's one of the exciting things that came out of the budget cycle, even though there were some dire pieces of it. Something really exciting about it. We've also added a ground crew worker and a crew leader for the tree crew. So getting people out there looking at our trees in right away, trying to maintain them, do what we can to keep it healthy. So good things related to trees in this most recent budget. And so again, I talked about this a little bit earlier, but outside of Home Tacoma, we enacted the strongest legal protections for trees in the right of way in nearly 100 years. Right? So trees in the right of way are more protected now than they've been for an entire century. So updated permit requirements, related regulations for pruning, removal, and planting of street trees, created a division for enforcement and imposition of monetary penalties for violations, so actually penalize people for violating the code, and established a heritage tree program. So again, these are trees in the right of way. So when we start thinking about trees in Tacoma, I want to just clarify that we have strong protection in the right of way in city property. When new housing is being built, we're going to make people try to preserve as much trees, canopy coverage on their lot as possible, and require them to plant trees. So the question now, where the focus shifts for the conversation, is what happens on sites where there's no development happening. So if I'm never going to pull up a permit to build something in my backyard, what are the protections on the tree that sits in my backyard, or your backyard, or anyone's backyard, right? And that's the conversation that we're moving into for IPS. And so, just as a little brief calendar, as Councilman Romas said, we're going to be talking a little bit about this tomorrow at the study session to give council members who aren't part of IPS an opportunity to kind of be part of the conversation, be part of the process. So that's tomorrow at the study session. The first IPS meeting is February 12th, where we're going to have an informational briefing on the urban forestry program, which will give Mike an opportunity to talk about all the things we're already doing, and what the current state around trees and urban forestry is. And then from there, I imagine council members and committee members will have questions for further discussion, kind of set the discussion, the stage for future policy decisions and kind of where we're going to go from there. And there's a next meeting on February 26th for discussion of next steps and potential policy updates. So I'm not the chair of IPS, that's Councilor Walker. She was not able to be here this evening, but we will go through those two meetings and then we'll kind of lay out the next steps for how we move forward from there. So that's kind of the calendar. So what I want to do, kind of next steps for this conversation, prior to going to my other questions for you all, are there any questions about the things I've shared so far? What's been out there? And some of you may actually lead me into the next questions. Yes. Yes. It just means any site where there's no building permit being pulled for like a potential development. So my house right now, I'm not developing anything. So the trees in my backyard, we're talking about what rules and regulations apply to them through this. If I'm pulling a building permit, we've already changed the code around that. I have to try to preserve trees, I'll have to pay for them. If I build something, I have to plant more trees. So that code's already in place. Like when development happens, we have things in place to try to encourage us to preserve trees, to plant trees, all those components. This conversation taking into what happens if you're not going to do anything in your backyard? Non-development sites. No. I mean, yes, irrespective of, yeah, it just, trees where there's no building permit being pulled that would lead to a change in state. Like a critical area, there's protections there, they can't remove trees on those anyways, right? So there's some protection there. Schools, and what this conversation also is doing is kind of taking it out of home to home, which just dealt with residential properties, and going to basically all sites in non-development, right? Because home Tacoma was gonna say residential properties, here's protections, but industrial sites, commercial sites, that it didn't change any code around that. Okay. Non-development sites, yeah. That's something we can workshop here. This is, somebody's writing that down, need a better word. Okay, Kit and then Tom, and then I think we might get into my questions. Kit.
Just a question on the non-development site. One of the favorite drives and favorite streets in Tacoma is Union Avenue, that little island in the middle with all those beautiful trees. So I went to the assessor's site today and it turns out nobody owns it. There's not a parcel number. So I assume the city of Tacoma owns it. Could you maybe explain that and explain to us how that's protected?
Well, it's in the right of way. And so we updated the right of way code earlier this year, so all the protections would fall on the right of way, but then fall on those trees too.
But there's no property owner that abuts those, so is that all the city has?
Actually, I know because I just did research.
Okay, let's go to the room here. And I see Mike creeping towards the microphone, so he might have something. Lisa?
Yeah, so actually I just emailed Jody last week with the answer to this question.
Yeah.
Part of the islands, part of the median is right of way, and part of it is are parcels owned by the city. Those were transferred from Parks Tacoma to the city in 2012. So maybe a follow-up to your question is, when you talk about non-development sites, some of those are parcels, but that part which is right of way, would that also be considered a non-development site?
Yeah. Yes. Because development site, and again, the way I would encourage people to think about it is think about your house. There's a tree in your backyard. What are the protections on that tree right now? There aren't any. What happens if you want to cut that tree down to build an ADU in your backyard? There are protections now because Home in Tacoma has put in protections for development. So when you try to pull a building permit, which would make a site, that's what you're trying to do some development, protections kick in. So a non-development site would be, what happens to a tree on a site where no one's pulling a building permit? Which I think was important for the conversation before, because there's a lot of people that followed Home in Tacoma very closely because they're concerned about development and change. And this wouldn't apply to this. So if you in your mind had checked out on Home in Tacoma and said, you know, I'm not really following because I'm never going to redevelop my property, I'm never going to change my house, this would have implied your property. And I think there were a lot of people who weren't paying attention to that conversation. So the goal is to kind of bring this conversation forward to people's minds. Like, hey, this conversation is about the tree in your yard, whether you want to do something with your yard ever again or not. Tom?
Yeah, I just wanted to commend you for creating that new position. I've had a couple of conversations with Ramon Chavez, and he's making progress and changing the mindset at public works. And he's starting an outreach program. I might suggest that he'd be a good speaker for this group, because he has ideas about complete streets as part of the street initiative. Yeah. And it's really good to hear that we're going to have some arborist involvement in the corners and street planting. Really good.
Yeah. not being surprised if there's a mature tree in the right of way when we're doing a building project is probably a really good thing. And really thinking about how we would work around that. Okay, I saw a hand over here and then, yep, right here. Yes.
Hi, so I'm all for trees. I think they're wonderful and I do think we need more. So I just want to say that before I make my next comment. How early in this process are you going to collect the potential pain points from homeowners with this new policy telling them when and where they can?
The kind of questions I want to ask next. Because I think those are the questions we need to be asking, right? And I'll use a story for a minute. So could we start collecting this now? Those are kind of questions I have. Yes.
I kind of have a big picture timeline question. I know that another big concern that a lot of folks felt wasn't addressed with home in Tacoma was big development. Well, when people are coming in to build new apartments and whatnot, are those questions still on the table for later? And we're starting with residential or, yeah.
Well, the questions around development were kind of addressed through home in Tacoma. So as people are pulling building permits related to new development, there are requirements around planting trees, around lot coverage, around if you remove a tree, there's certain costs and fees you have to pay associated with it. So that component around development and trees is kind of settled at this point in time. At least it's kind of, we finished that as part of home to home. We're seeing where it goes from here. This conversation is shifting more to the non-development side trees. And so what I would say is if people have concerns about trees and development, not things moving forward, it's fine to have, we can talk about those as part of this conversation, and my questions here will help us kind of think through some of that, hopefully. But this conversation is really focused on the trees on private property there's no development happening. Yeah, go right here, and then Peter, you get your chair. You got some other folks first. Yes.
Probably not very fitting. Northwest, and we considered replacing them with more fitting trees that would thrive better and be better for the environment. So I'm just wondering if when we're encouraging more trees, which is amazing, are there any are we directing people towards native trees or something that would be the healthiest trees for the environment? And if somebody had a tree, I'm not cutting them down, I don't want to cut them down, but if I were to find a more suitable replacement, is there something in the conversation about type of tree and how that can impact? Does that make sense?
No, I mean, these are the kind of questions that I'm glad you brought that up. That's something we do need to talk about is that, right? And, what if I have a tree in my backyard that's very large, but I want to, but it's a large tree that's not native here, and I want to remove it and plant something native. Well, some of these protections would say, no, you can't do it, the tree's big. So of a certain size, you can't cut the tree down. So the question you're asking is something we have to be thinking about in the policy. Like, what about this instance where it's a non-native tree and I want to plant a native tree? So Christina in the back is writing these questions down for us to kind of help think through. And then, but before I see a lot of hands, it's great. So I just want to talk about some of these questions here before I start bringing people weighing in here. So there's 3 questions that I think we need to make sure we're having in mind when we talk about trees in non-development sites. So someone told me a good point, right? Which is, so I have a sequoia tree across the street from my house. So I'll use my personal story. So I have probably an 80 or 90-year-old sequoia tree on my neighbor's property across the street. It's huge, right? It provides shade on my house, provides shade for the neighborhood. There is a public benefit associated with that tree, right? But the question that we have is, if that tree breaks his foundation, or busts a pipe in his house, or falls on his house and breaks something, is the public going to help him pay for that? So there's a question around the public is getting a benefit by that really large tree, but the costs associated with it are completely up on the homeowner. So a question I've been kind of thinking through is, how do we approach that as a city? Right? What's the answer to that situation? And so this is kind of the thing I've been, as I'm thinking about tree policy and what we do for trees on non-development sites, that's one of the questions I have. that I would love to hear people's thoughts and feedback on with that. The other question I had is, so these are the basic ones. What requirements should the city have in place to maintain trees while upholding private property rights, right? So there's a question there right now. Currently, if a tree's on your private property, it's yours. That's the way the current code is. It's your tree, it's your private property. If you decide you're tired of raking leaves, you can remove the tree. Right? If you decide that it's too much of a threat to your garage, or you just don't like it, or it's not native and you want a different tree, currently the code says you can remove it. Yeah, with no question, you can just remove it. So this is one of those questions we have to ask is, well, what's the balance we strike there? And I do agree, like the large sequoia tree across from my house does provide a benefit to me. There's a community benefit associated with it, so we have to kind of navigate that. Who should pay for maintaining trees on private property? If there's a public benefit to the tree, but the costs are all private, how do we navigate that? And should a resident be allowed to remove a tree on private property for any reason, or should there be reasons why they can't? I may think removing a tree because you can't rake leaves anymore doesn't make sense. But if I'm 85 years old and I can't get outside and rake my leaves anymore, maybe that's my answer. Or so maybe there's, how do we do that? So I really was hoping that you all could kind of help. If you have questions or like, hey, John, this is what I think about that. And Christina's kind of writing this stuff down, and this is going to help me kind of think through, and I can share with my committee members based on kind of feedback from you all. So, all right, news and drive, Peter.
Is the planting strip between the sidewalk and the road right of way, or is that the same as the tree in the backyard?
Right away.
That's right.
Now, if it breaks the sidewalk, you're responsible for fixing the sidewalk, right? Even though it's in the right of way. But that tree is, so that tree in the sidewalk falls under the right of way code. So there's protections, you can't remove it without a permit, a lot of things around that. Yeah, okay, we're gonna go.
So related right away, like that situation.
Yeah.
When you get a lot surveyed, the stake's kind of in the middle of your yard, well past the sidewalk.
Mhm.
So from that sidewalk to that point, is that right away?
Yeah,
So there's an awful lot of trees that people think they own, they don't.
correct. Which is why, I mean, so this is one of those questions with the change in the right of way code, we have to kind of close on that one.
A lot of education of the city meeting.
Yeah, there's also trees that are on property lines that people think they own that they don't. I recently negotiated that with it, I didn't negotiate anything. I went through that experience with a neighbor of mine where someone thought the tree was on their property and the neighbor removed it, only to find that it wasn't on their property. Long story. Yes, good. Joe.
Maintenance of trees on private property. And right now, the property, having had a tree fall on something I own.
Yep.
Even though the tree was in bad condition, if that tree falls on your property, unless you can prove negligence, you're responsible for cleaning it up. There's about 100 years, more than 100 years of history on that, so you want to walk carefully with it.
Yeah.
There's almost no requirements to maintain trees. So the third question I have, de novo, is what's a tree? I have a little big tree in my backyard that is overgrown in space. Definitely not a native tree, it's from the Middle East. So if I want to eliminate that big tree, is that going to be covered by this? I think you need to define what trees you're talking about. Because there are a lot of little fruit trees, exterior fruit trees, dwarf fruit trees, landscape trees, that I don't think fall in the category of civic concerns.
And so those are all great points, Joe. I think that gets us closer to the question I'm getting here, right? Is where is the line, right? What point do we say that tree is below a certain threshold? You as a property owner, feel free to remove it. Or that tree is above a certain threshold and therefore you need a special permit, or there's a certain cost, or we're still in kind of the infancy. I mean, your point is a good one, Joe, and I'm sure Mike will talk to us about what other cities are doing around this, and there probably more likely than not is a model in which we can follow. So we're not creating this out of whole cloth. But I think these are the questions we're trying to kind of navigate. Okay, so I'm gonna try to get people who I haven't seen hands raised, and I'll come back around. So yes.
For the third question about being allowed to remove a tree, I would like to see added to that or top. Because when people top their trees, it will eventually kill them, you know, sooner than later. And, you know, that severe kind of pruning, you know, feel like it's just as important to the people that want to take their tree out of their property.
Yeah. Okay, yes, so talking about tree topping too, which is when we did the trees on the right of way, we talked about this, we said you can't top them, we precluded that. We said you could winnow them, right, you could thin them for potentially view preservation. We said you can't top them because it could kill the tree. So we have a good model from what we're doing the right of way that could be part of that conversation. Thank you, that's a good one. Okay, yes.
What about planning commission on proposed landscape plans for home and Tacoma, which is expressly not adopted as part of home and Tacoma? Would that not be a good starting point as to sizes and types of trees that do deserve protection on, as now being described, non-developed sites?
Yeah, I mean, I think that will definitely be one of the things, the places we will start. We'll be looking at what the planning commission recommended. But I think that what maybe didn't get lost by the planning commission or some of the folks in here, but I think what was lost was there were a lot of people not paying attention to that part of home in Tacoma because they were like, I'm never gonna redevelop my property. So this doesn't apply to me. This is about density and adding more housing. And this component is, well, what if now then we're changing the code on for people who maybe weren't paying attention. So we want to really kind of just dive in on that part of it. Like your trees, private property, you're never going to redevelop it, but you know, what are the protections that exist? So I think the planning commission conversation will be part of this. We'll start by in the informational briefing by the urban forestry plan, just to talk about what was the proposal that came from the planning commission about that specifically. So, yeah. Okay, we're here, and then we're going to cycle here, here, and then here. Yes. Yep.
Your question about planning and it's not that easy to figure out what tree to plant. The city has a list of trees that are preferred, trees that you want, but in your yard, in your backyard, which one of those trees fit? So resources for that very issue, standing our urban forest department to give us the help in planting the right trees.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good suggestion. Not for this neighborhood council, but for the West End neighborhood council, the conversation is more around trees blocking views. And so one of the things we've talked about is like right tree, right place. There are trees you can plant that are maybe their terminal heights are a little lower. They don't have quite the view impacts, but you get more trees on the lots than you have in the past. And so thinking about helping people think about what trees go in the right spots for that. But if you want to plant fir trees and block the neighbor's view, there's nothing that stops you from doing that. So, then it was gonna be here, and here, and then, yep, okay, yes.
Okay. So on the topic of considering if the community benefits from a tree like your sequoia, does the community possibly help pay for the maintenance of that? And that's a lovely idea to think about, except in the scheme of things, then you start to incur a lot of costs for the city when you start about how many trees there are. And balancing that with high poverty rate and other programs that are pretty critical for people, and low income folks and that kind of thing. So I'm sure I see a whole systems approach with a lot of this, just making sure we don't put something in place that's a lovely idea, but then is going to cause us to have to cut programs that are really critical. That's all.
Okay.
Just thought.
Yeah, I know this is good. One of the questions I have. Yeah.
Hi, John, getting back to the defining, what is a tree and based on size, or I'm a little bit concerned about policies that would encourage homeowners to plant small trees so that those trees aren't regulated, aren't big enough to be regulated by the city.
Yeah.
And, I mean, small trees are already pretty popular
Yeah.
because they're easy to maintain. If you want to remove them, it's pretty inexpensive. You know, they're easily replaced. So I'm just concerned about
Yeah.
promoting small trees over big trees.
Yeah. No, that's good. It's a good point, right? I see many fir trees go down in my neighborhood and be replaced by Japanese maples in the last 10 years, right? So I've just seen multiples. So that's a good point about kind of how our incentives, structure, and policy maybe doesn't get us the outcome we want. Right. Yes.
Yeah, a question and a thought. I'm curious about enforcement. If your neighbor cuts down a beautiful 40, 50-year-old tree, what is the avenue for repercussions? Are we supposed to be, calling the hotline and saying, my neighbor cut down a tree? Are we narking on our neighbors? Or is it an education thing? And partially on to educate homeowners, but also say arborists, like who is going out and doing that work and who needs to know that is against city code at this point, what enforcement? That's a question.
Yeah.
And a thought on maintenance. I'm a crew lead for Northwest Youth Corps. So we have worked with more or less every planting agency in Pierce County at this point. We got a big grant to do that across Washington, Oregon, and Idaho, and it's a 5-year grant. And we go and plant a lot of the trees, partially for the city, working with Tacoma Tree Foundation and others. And Tacoma Tree Foundation is also going out there with their meager staff and watering things. What happens when that nonprofit piece disappears from the city's puzzle? And these trees got planted 6 months ago, and now all of a sudden there's a big lift on maintenance to keep all those newly planted trees flat.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good question about, and I've talked to many people in here, it's not just the planting of the tree, it's, trees they take a few years of support and maintenance before they can grow and kind of live into adulthood, or I don't know what you call adulthood for trees, they grow up into bigger trees. So this is a question we have, right, which is, we're planting trees, if we're planting in front of people's houses, are we educating them on how to properly care for them? If we're planting on the city right away, are we able to care for them ourselves? And this is one of the ongoing budget conversations we have, is like, how many tree people do we need to kind of maintain what the city has and encourage more? How can we partner with nonprofits if we need to kind of do that? So those are good questions. Your point about what do we do about enforcement? So a lot of it is referral based, right? So people calling in, right-of-way trees are protected, so people should call in if people are cutting trees in the right-of-way without a proper permit, so they need to have a permit for that. But because there are no protections on private property right now, the way it works is that you get a tree on your property until you decide you don't want it there anymore. It's kind of where it's at. So if your neighbor's cutting down a tree in their backyard, as long as they are doing it safely, they're currently allowed to do that. So that's one of the points we have to get to is, okay, well, what if and this is one of the pieces, I guess I'll be honest with you, that I was a bit concerned about with some of the protections, which is we don't have a fully funded tree police, right? So enforcement is not, so then you are depending upon neighbors, reporting neighbors, and then whether we're able to enforce that or not. So if we do want to go down the path of preserving trees on private property, we're going to need residents to call and report those things, and then we're going to need an enforcement mechanism, some people to be able to force to do that. So, yeah. Ooh, okay. Hands I haven't seen yet, so I'm trying to, yes, ma'am, and then right here. Yes.
I'm coming from the voice of an HOA board member for a dozen years, and I can hear my neighbors just talking about this. One of the things that I would recommend the city do that would not cost the city money would be to educate the local nursery and home improvement center on what's acceptable and what isn't, and let them help the homeowners decide what's best for their yard. And master gardeners, there's a lot of the farmers markets and whatnot. They always have a master gardener situation, little booth there. They could be another resource that doesn't cost the city anything. I have a neighbor who has 3 sides of his backyard is all 8-foot tall laurel hedges. Would that count as trees? One of the things we're looking at is removing one of the trees so that we have more sun in his backyard so we can plant vegetables. So that's another thing that I think needs to be considered is what are you going to do with your yard, right? How do you want to use it? As you get further down this process, I think it's gonna be super important to address to the homeowners, what is the benefit for them personally? Shade on the house, lower, cooling costs, whatever that is, it's gonna be a really big sell, because this is.
Houses with trees sell better.
Yeah, another thing too is that you've got, youth groups and scouts that, working through like the various churches and things. You gave the example of the 85-year-old who can't break. I think there's a lot of volunteer opportunities that doesn't put a burden on the city. I think you can transfer those burdens on to other organizations. And as far as like giving, I think the more choices that you can give the homeowners, like this is the best choice, this is Tacoma's ideal plan. This is a good choice. This is an okay choice, but these choices over here are not acceptable. And that way they can, giving them some parameters so they can make the decisions that they need to based on how they want to use their property, costs, and whatever else.
Okay. No, I think those are all really good. I mean, a big piece of this will be education, right? Which is, I think, one of the pieces that I was really hoping would come out of this process, is we could further educate the public about this conversation and get people maybe more narrowly focused on this conversation of tree preservation, which I think was part of the home control process, but it was part of home control was huge. There's a lot that happened there. And so this is a way to really kind of bring the attention right onto that in some ways for the neighbors. Right here, yes, and then, yep, right here, and then I'll go back to people I saw hands with already. Yes?
Could you define right of way for me?
I might have to defer to Mike, but he'll correct me when I think it's the city-owned property from the road, center of the road where their property ends, like your, the planting strip, the sidewalk, that's all in the right of way.
But the homeowner is responsible for a sidewalk that's not there.
Yes. Yeah, and yes, they are.
So that's very confusing to me, because when you talk about enforcement, I live in the north end where there are a lot of trees and neighbors don't pick up their leaves. The sidewalks are a hazard. The leaves cover the hazardous sidewalk. Who is responsible for fixing that sidewalk, breaking the leaves, whatever? I've called 311 and it's been almost 2 years and nothing has happened regarding the sidewalks. So over the trip, there's leaves, there's a broken sidewalk. I reported it. Is the city gonna pay for the entrance to that person, or is the homeowner going to?
It's 50-50. Often that's how it works out. So half your homeowner's insurance policy and half the city.
So my expectation as somebody who's reported that, do you feel that 2 years, nothing has happened, is that acceptable or not acceptable?
I mean,
My understanding was that if I reported it, the city would send a letter to the person and say, this is a hazardous sidewalk, somebody would come out, they painted the side, put that pink thing on there, and that the homeowner or the city would take care of it. If the homeowner didn't take care of it, the city would take care of it. And none of it has happened. And now you've got this conversation about trees and leaves, and it's just compounded. Plus, you want us to walk everywhere. So it's like a very
Yeah.
complicated.
well, and I think, and to get to the sidewalk, I'm gonna let Mike answer the right of way question first before I go back to that one. So Mike, what is the right of way? Just so it clear my comment.
And just, thank you for the question. For clarity's sake, there are parcel portions of land, right? So it's the physical area that somebody owns, right, outright in fee. It's what's deeded on your property when you buy your home. It's what's in your deed, right? The area that's directly outside of that portion of land that's deeded outright to you is what's called the right of way. So it's unparceled land that's outside of parcels.
A sidewalk.
The sidewalk is included within the public right of way, but it also includes the street. It might actually be unimproved areas too, that kind of look like naturalized areas, but those areas, if they're outside of a parcel boundary, it's in the public right of way. And the way that the public right of way works is that the underlying fee owner of that portion of land is the adjoining property owner, which is why you're responsible. But the city maintains accessory rights to the use of that property for the good of the public, like public transportation, like utilities, like those other services that share benefits the entire public. And so the responsibility question, coming back to that, is you are the underlying fee owner of that portion of land that the city maintains an accessory right for the good of the public. So that's why you're responsible for the tree, the sidewalk, etc. Putting my real property services hat on.
Yeah, and To answer your question, 2 years, I mean, no, I don't think 2 years is is a vast enough time to address that. I think there's two components to that. If the sidewalk's broken and you report it, the city does send that property owner a letter. But then they're also expensive to fix, and so, and there's also, the city has miles and miles of sidewalk, so we're slowly trying to work our way through them. So in the best possible sense, that lay person gets the letter, they have the money, they fix a sidewalk. They don't have the money, and they can't fix it. The city could put a lien on their property and make them do it. We don't tend to like to put liens on people's property. We try to do voluntary compliance. Or the city is working its way through trying to build out the sidewalk network, and they're coming through and trying to fix the broken sidewalks as they can.
My understanding about the lien part of it was the city would come and fix it, and were the homeowner to sell their house, that was when the city would be reimbursed for the cost of that sidewalk.
Oh, sorry, yes, a lien, so that's, a lien is that basically the city would charge you for it, and then when you sold the property, or whatever, so they would be the first person to get paid, so you sold your house. Yeah. No, and there's lots and lots of sidewalks in our city. That are not getting fixed, right? And it's the challenge of, if it was in a perfect world, the sidewalk was broken by your property, you benefit from it, you have enough money, and you fix it. We also, but that's not kind of some of the world we live in, and so if we don't have that, then we're left to the city kind of investing this money over time and fixing broken sidewalks. And we have this broken sidewalk fund, which is not big enough. We also have lots of parts of the city that don't have any sidewalks, so we're trying to balance the building out the sidewalk network with also maintaining the sidewalks we have.
And
So-
I'm sorry for this big conversation, but it's the whole notion of all of these old trees dropping their leaves, people not picking their leaves, and it's a genuine hazard.
Yeah, I mean, this is why fruit trees were banned in the right of way up until 6 months ago. We banned fruit trees in the right of way because 50, 60 years ago, someone was mad that people just left trees on the sidewalk, and so we banned them. We've since relaxed that ban, right, with the hope that the property owners are gonna rake them up and like not make it be a problem. But yeah, I mean, this is one of the challenges that we have here. To kind of come back to a high level point that I think I'm picking up, right? So questions around things that people want us thinking about. Are there specific trees that should never be removed? Probably something around the size of the tree is something should be considered, right? Trees that are so big, there should be some considerations around whether those get removed or not. Trees that are native versus non-native, conversation around something like that. Conversations about what is a tree and what is a bush or hedge. Conversations around that. Yeah, I mean, are all things that we should be thinking about as part of this. And Mike, we should look at some of this, but this is just kind of reiterating the further kind of thoughts here. Okay. If you had a question, go ahead and raise your hand. I'm gonna go through. Okay, so we're gonna go. Because I haven't heard from you yet at all, so I'll go here first, and then I'm gonna come this way. Yes.
One thing I haven't heard that is like a real concern to me is that we have a significant number of forest patches too. I mean, that's the way I talk about forest patches. So kind of collection of trees that were here prior to development, often before development, that are still here. And having maybe even like thinking about those a little differently than the way we would think about like an individual assessment tree. So that's one thing I would really love to see. And I have some others.
Okay.
But I think that there's, and I think the sidewalk conversation has to come with this old tree protection conversation as well. Like they're kind of married, at least in certain spaces. And I think if we don't think about how these older trees are impacting sidewalks, then we're just gonna run into a lot of barriers to actually protecting these trees. And I think for me, like, just to put it out there, I think like it is these older trees they're like, we have some trees that are really significant, and then there are other trees that are nice, great to have, but they're easier to replace, and they're not participating as much in the canopy conversation. I'll just give you one example, which is this incredible madrone that was right next to a building got cut down as a result of the sale. There wasn't even the person who, it's just like between owners basically right now.
And it was a beautiful winter run, and it was, you know, we won't be able to replace that tree in any way. And those are the kinds of trees that are really sad to see, when they go. And that, I think, is the other thing I wanted to mention, which is this like sales thing that happens. We're all seeing that, like, when the house goes up for sale, before it's even at its like permanent owner, those trees get cut down in preparation for sale. And as Sarah said, it's really like research shows that the house is worth more with the trees on it. So if we can do something that also maybe helps with that conversation of like the real estate side of things, that would be great.
Yeah. Okay. That's a really good point to be thinking through that conversation. Okay. Right here, ma'am, and then Tom, and then Jeff.
Question that you probably won't do, but I'm gonna put it out there, because I'm part of TUF,
Yeah.
and we've talked about the city taking ownership of the right of way and the sidewalk. Is that even a possibility?
I mean, it is something, so I'm a big, I'd be really honest, I'm a really big fan of Denver, who passed their Demonstrator Sidewalks program where they charge people per linear foot of sidewalk as a fee, and they take back control of the sidewalk. Like you pay a yearly fee for your sidewalk, and they take back control, and then they're responsible for maintenance and upkeep, and it releases you from the liability. That's currently illegal under state law in the state of Washington, just FYI, we don't have a sidewalk utility, but it's something we've been asking about at the state level to let us do it. I think the question, I'll just say actually, I don't mean to say, but you know, the reason we've landed in this place where the sidewalk is partially your responsibility, and the tree, if it falls in your backyard, you have to clean it up, is those all have costs. So if the city was to take those responsibilities, the city would have to find a way to pay for all that. And as someone who just went through a process of cutting the budget to pay for things like fire, there's not a lot of fat in the budget to say like, hey, just cut all this other stuff and just pay for trees. So if we want to go down the route of, in which, I mean, this could be part of the conversation. I know people have talked to me about this. We want to go down the route of the city being fully liable for the sidewalks and doing the sidewalks, and fully liable for the trees in the right of way, and planting trees and maintaining them. It has a cost that we're gonna have to pay for, but currently we get the subsidy right now if we don't pay for it. Like we get, like the big beautiful tree in my neighbor's backyard, all benefit to me, zero cost, right? If we want to have more of that, it has a cost. And that's, I mean, and if the public, our community says, hey, you know what, John, we really want to pay more taxes because that's really important to what we believe as a community, then we can do that. We have ways to raise taxes to pay for things. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. About heritage tree programs and ones that actually are not voluntary, because other places have this, and people have kind of brought it up a little bit. Could you just talk a little bit about that?
Heritage trees.
Yeah, so I think what you're talking about is protections for specific trees, like big trees. So actually we'll talk a lot about it coming up soon with council. It's one of the things that we do a lot of research on during Home in Tacoma as well. So I'll back up a second. If you go back to some of the research documents for Home in Tacoma in preparation with that project planning commission, one of the presentations was all on benchmarking research. And a lot of that was about heritage tree programs, tree protections, what size is enough large tree, or excuse me, what tree is big enough to be protected, or special enough, whether it's a specific species to be protected, culturally important tree. And so I think generally speaking, there's a lot of different ways that communities slice and dice heritage trees. Some are based on species, based on size, based on location. And I don't know that we have enough at this point with the city to say what direction would be right for our community. I think it's part of this conversation, right? Is figuring out where that line is. There's a lot of different options out there. And if council's interested or the community's interested, we can bring back up some of that research through Home to Home that we do with our consultant team to see what are all the options that other folks are doing right now.
Good, perfect. Thank you, Mike. All right, Amy, so I saw Tom, Jeff, Tom.
I'm 85 years old and I have a 90-foot Norway maple in my backyard. And I can tell you, I'm attracted to tree drum. It's unbelievable. But in the 2 years that I've been involved in looking at this, one thing, the issue has changed from concern about cutting trees to much deeper issue, and it starts with why do we have trees in the first place? And one of the answers to that question is to avoid stormwater runoff. And we have a stormwater plan now, and I wonder if the council is looking at how do we combine the two issues because they're directly related. And if we don't think about trees as a way to prevent stormwater runoff, we're missing a big opportunity. The research I've done, cities that are in the best shape are the ones whose rules say you have to keep the stormwater on the property where it occurs. You know, they have rules that when they do development, the developer has to find a way to keep the stormwater on the property that he's developing. And I just was thinking about that as part of this process.
Not specifically to this one, but we are looking at our stormwater manual and wastewater manuals. We're updating those as part of the broader conversation about how we manage density here in the city. And as we add people to the city, how are we managing our stormwater and wastewater system? So that is a separate conversation that's happening around the same time that this could definitely feed into as part of that. As we think about green infrastructure and building things in the right of way that help manage that, there's that component of it. So I think it's definitely common and will be part of the conversations we think about, you know, what are the benefits these trees are providing. Yeah.
I'm going to talk about something that happened about 30 years ago when we had the big ice storm, I think in the late 90s. And it damaged a lot of trees in the city right of way, and the city didn't seem to be prepared to deal with a lot of damage to a lot of trees all at once. And I'm thinking that that's something that needs to be part of the conversation in terms of how do you prepare. And, you know, do you have a emergency fund in the urban forestry fund? If you're gonna also regulate now private trees or trees on private property and undeveloped space, it just seems like it's gonna be a much bigger problem when we get that next ice storm.
Yeah.
And so I'm just concerned that it was handled so badly 30 years ago. I mean, I think the urban forester got fired, if I remember correctly, and I just don't
Keep that
want
in mind.
that to happen again.
Next ice storm.
So it's, you know, not gonna happen often,
Yeah.
hopefully, but it's a critical incident I think needs to be taken into consideration.
Well, and I mean, oh, did I turn this off? No, it's test. Oh. It died. Okay, thank you, folks.
The speaker doesn't.
The speaker doesn't. Oh, you prepared? He knew. All right, I'll let you load that one up. I'll just talk to the camera, wave my hands here, people at home. No, I mean, I think that's a broader, that is a question we have to answer as we think about how, if we were to take on more tree management and tree support, is how would we deal with it in those situations? Like, what would that look like? Because you're right. I mean, there's the answer to get to your point, which is underlying, I think is something here, right? Is at some level, we have to be able to meet the level of service the public expects for the most part, right? So a big ice storm comes in and we've taken responsibility for the right-of-way trees and we said, hey, we got it. The trees are all going to be taken care of. Then you have a reasonable expectation that we're going to do that sometime in like a year after the tree ice storm happens, right? We have to have capacity in which to manage those things, which is, as we're getting into these conversations, what does that look like? And again, right-of-way trees, very separate. We don't have a right-of-way tree code updated. This conversation can really kind of go on to this piece right here. And I like to frame it in a lot of ways around trees on your properties. I just encourage people to think about your own property in some ways, because it's really easy for me to say, like, my neighbor needs to keep that tree in their house, backyard. It's beautiful. It does all these benefits for me, but it's because it's my neighbor's yard. And so I think it's important for us to be thinking just about, well, what about if it was in your yard? Well, how would you how do we design the policies in such a way to make that work? Because I mean, yeah, so I think these are the questions that keep coming around. I'm hearing things. Heritage trees, specific trees that meet a certain criteria are something we should be thinking about protecting. It's trees of a certain size. Certain, and these are, what is a tree and what isn't a tree? You know, what are we, how do we deal with native trees versus non-native trees? These are all good questions that I think we should be, that I'm really good to hear kind of the thought, thinking through this. Okay.
Can I follow up?
Yeah.
Maybe I wasn't clear about, I'm sure.
Having a plan and the resources, yeah.
I'm sure I wasn't clear that some property owners wanted to keep their damaged tree.
Oh, yeah.
The city cut it down.
Okay.
And so
Oh.
there was, you know, lawsuits around
Yeah.
that. And so what, on private property, if somebody wants to keep their damaged tree.
They should be able to do it.
Should they be able to do that? You know, so there's kind of these case by case basis issues that you're gonna need to take into consideration about what happens after the tree is damaged. Do you leave it? Does it become a habitat tree? You know, that kind of thing.
Well, no, and I think that's a good point, because what if the tree is damaged, I want it there, but some arborist says it's gonna, could fall down and potentially harm somebody.
Yeah.
Who decides whether the tree gets to stay or not?
The homeowner's insurance issue then.
I mean, that's, I'm just a question. I mean, sure, all right, okay.
Two more questions.
I see two people who have not seen their hands raised so far, and guess what? I'm not going anywhere. I'll probably go home tonight, but like, I'm not going anywhere off the council for a period of time, and I'll be part of the conversation. So if you didn't get your question answered right this second, I can answer it. So we'll go right here first.
Say, this whole discussion to me has just been fairly overwhelming, as it is. It's sad that we came from being the destination of trees, basically. Tacoma was the tree capital of the United States at one point. And now we're like way under the 30% cover, which we're trying to be shooting for. And there's a lot to be done, but I think that a public campaign maybe to write that and get back to that place might be really important, especially to the younger folks, because obviously we won't live, most of us, to see these trees do much a difference here anyway, so.
Yeah, I think that's a good point about educating people. I mean, I think that's a critical component we're getting out of this conversation is making sure people know this conversation is happening, making sure people know what the benefits are, making sure people understand choices, this idea of how do we get more. I would just preface, right, like it's part of Home Tacoma, if new housing's built, we're gonna require people to plant a lot of trees. And I know that doesn't, you know, the old saying, like the best time to plant a tree was 40 years ago, the second best time is right now. So hopefully we can make some good decisions on trees now. Okay. I've got some people I haven't seen, and then I see Tim in the back too, so.
I just wanted to make a comment about, tree equity. I think that this conversation is in some ways a lot larger. That in fact, the redlining map that we had in the city of Tacoma, that prevented non-white people from purchasing homes in specific areas, are now suffering from the least canopy coverage. And so this is not only a conversation of trees, it's a conversation about health and equity within our community. And I hope, you know, and at the same time, I understand deeply the costs associated with trees. When a homeowner purchases a home and it has a 50-year-old tree in the front and those roots are going through the sewer line and the sewer is going to cost that homeowner $20,000, the first recommendation that contractor is going to make is say cut it down. And if you have money and you also understand the value of that tree, you are not going to cut it down. So there are a lot of pain points with trees, and I think that these conversations are much bigger. These conversations are about tree equity, they're about health within our community. And here in the north side of Tacoma, we have the most trees. So I feel like I really love being a part of this conversation in this room, because so many of us see and feel the benefit of trees. And unfortunately, many of our neighbors on the east side of Tacoma, south side of Tacoma don't experience that. So thank you for letting us have this conversation.
Yeah, I know. I think that's a real important conversation that we need to have, right? And I think one of the critical components around home in Tacoma and having the tree planting requirements has developed come from making people plant trees, right? Because we want to make sure more trees are being planted in the areas where we're seeing development happen, right? So they're growing at the same time. And really a commitment to the fact that we value trees and we see them as being really important. So I think your point is well taken as someone who grew up on 56th and Alaska Street with 2 really large maple trees in my yard, right? So there are some is thinking about how do we make sure every neighborhood gets trees? How do we make sure that's part of kind of the built environment of our entire city? Okay, Tim, you hadn't asked a question yet. I thought I'd go with somebody who hadn't asked one yet. Or made a comment about the questions.
I'm surprised to hear mention people thinking they own trees on the right of way and they don't. Because I think it's much more common that people think they don't own the trees on the right of way, where in fact they do. I mean, in practice, in effect, they do. I think if you have any average person in Tacoma, so you got your yard, right? Yeah. You got your fence, okay. And then outside that, that's not your property, right? No. So the sidewalk, not your property, no. And then the curb, no. Grass in between the sidewalk and curb, no, not my property. And so then imagine now that there's a tree out there, it's a city plant, 50 years ago. You didn't plant it. Previous owner didn't plant it, the city planted it. The city did the sidewalk. And now, so you ask the person, if that tree falls over and questions your neighbor's BMW, who's saying to the BMW, they say, well, I guess the city, because it's their trees, they planted on their property. No, it's you. I think you'd be very surprised to hear that. And I think we don't want to let people know that because they all go out and cut the tree. Because they still can't. The other thing that surprised me here was here you seem to indicate that now we've got the city right of way trees, we got that taken care of now, good. And that where there's development happening on lots, we got new regulations on that, so we're good there. I don't feel good about either of those things. I watched the process of the new right-of-way tree regulation slowly move over the past many years. And to say that the regulations are more protective of trees now than they've been in a century, while it is factually true, we should not be feeling great about that, because there have been no protection for all that century except the last couple of years, and now there's a little bit. So, hey, that's been a century. No, let's not talk that way. Let's say we just finally got our attention brought to this matter and made a baby step.
Yeah.
Okay, and I found that the city's implementation of that new law has been slow and timid. Have we made any progress in demanding quality arborists be working on our local tree services? Last time I asked anybody about this, it was, well, we can't play favorites. Let's say somebody wants to do wiring in their house, they go and they get a permit. And then they and their buddy from the tavern go in and do the electrical work and the house burns down. Oh, we don't want to play favorites. Because, we want to let those guys dig around with it when they don't know what they're doing, because we don't want to play favorites.
I mean, they probably didn't pull a permit when they did the wiring.
They got it. And then if you get an electrical permit, you gotta have a bond, license, electricians will fill the permit. You get a permit to work on a tree or a right of way. And plenty of those are gonna do work. Am I right? Is there any requirement that the tree service that works on that tree be qualified to do that? Last time I asked about that, it's like, I don't want to favorites, but we're gonna You got some idea, you know, are these people trained? Are they trained? Do they know the city's regulations? If they get in there and they look it up, is there any consequence to those people who did that? I'm thinking of the Frisco freeze tree, which I think was a travesty, and I think that the city should have protected that tree, and I think that the city didn't make sure that the people who worked on that tree were qualified, and they were from out of town, and a bunch of other stuff about that.
I'll let Mike answer the technical question on that one about who him. Is it just a register? I mean, maybe Mike can answer the technical question, then yeah.
There was a lot to unpack in that, and I'd love to have a conversation with you after this, if you're willing, so I know we're trying to wrap up on time. The one thing I'll mention is that with the update to the regulations for right-of-way trees, it does require that anybody performing work on a tree in the right-of-way does so in accordance with the NENC standards. So there's specific training that arborists get on how to adequately prune trees, and they have to demonstrate compliance to those standards when they do the pruning. And we now have, actually through this last budget enhancement that happened in mid-biennium budget adjustments this about a year ago, we got a new arborist position working in planning development services that reviews all of the applications for tree permits in the right of way. They do inspections for all those tree permits, including post pruning inspections. And they've been calling it out. If someone puts in a tree pruning plan, which is required for the permit, and it doesn't have those adequate resources cited or pruning practices, they say, no, you can no longer do that. And so again, it's this, as you mentioned, it's a slow process to go from really no regulations to some regulations, much better regulations, I will say. But again, it takes staffing, it takes resourcing, it takes the implementation, and we have to untrain the community that we actually do care about trees in the right of way now. We are going to follow through with the permit requirements. We are going to do inspections. And there are ways that other communities have addressed that more rapidly. Seattle, for instance, they have a requirement that to do any tree pruning in the right of way, you have to be a certified, like a kind of a holder on a list that says that you've undergone training with the city, you know what the permit requirements are, those types of things. And I think the Councilmember Hines points, this is part of the discussion we're about to jump into now, is what is the line? How do we protect things? What are those options, tools in our toolbox, you could say, to protect things adequately? And so this is the kind of feedback we would love.
And yeah, no, I think that's, thank you, Mike.
So we are seeing enforcement of poorly trained or in unqualified tree services.
Yeah,
Well, that's good.
yeah.
Where can we see the list of the qualified training tree services?
Where can we see the list of qualified trained tree services, Mike? That makes sure people way over here.
Yes, this is my tagline that I tell everybody who asks that question, which is the International Society of Arboriculture, ISA for short. They're the ones who train folks on being a certified arborist. You have to hold your credential through that organization. They have a website, and on that website, you can search for an arborist that works in your area, and you can look by region, by zip code, by city, and that's where I tell people to go to find qualified people to do tree work. Now, again, it's not a requirement that you hold that license to be able to do tree work, but that's where I tell people to go. And I mean, to your point earlier, because we are a government entity, we cannot say, go to that person. That person's the right person for you. Because it is a favoritism issue and it's technically not allowed for us. But we can say, you have to do it with certain standards that are industry adopted standards. And we'll call it out if you propose something that is not in compliance with the standard. That's where we're at.
Okay.
Could
All
you
right.
repeat the name of that organization?
International Society of Arboriculture, ISA.
Okay.
The website.
Treesaregood.org and more. Peter, give me the hook at this one time, or?
We need to sort of.
All right, I see Joe's hand. And yes.
I haven't heard any discussion or mention here of the city's goal to increase the canopy to 30% by the year 2030. I do not think it's possible. I think it is laudable. I think that we all know why we need to work for that goal. The city understood it years ago when it set that goal. but never created a plan that would achieve that goal. Now it's too late. Because the trees you plant today will not provide canopy in 5 years. The kind of canopy we need is shades the street, shades the roofs. We're not talking about ground cover. I mean, we can do it with black cover. If it was ground cover, it's canopy. It's a tall tree and it's too late to meet the goal. Can the city council please make a reasonable goal with an actual plan to achieve the goal?
Yeah, I mean, this is part of the conversation we're gonna have with every forestry plan. I mean, but then the question you run back to with, if that is the, well, yeah, there's lots, I'll thank you very much for your time this evening. I'm gonna, it close to the end here, that's a lot of questions. I think what I would just come back to is these questions I think are really important because as somebody brought up, I think about not only the person who lives, I won't say lives somewhere, the person who has the means by which they can navigate any system to protect a tree or do whatever they need to do. And I think about the person who has no means whatsoever. And we have to craft a policy that balances some of that, right? Because what I think a lot about is, I mean, I don't know, someone could probably tell me if I wanted to remove a tree in the right of way, the cost to not only remove it, but to pay for an arborist to come out and tell me if I can or can't do it. I mean, so we're already erecting lots of barriers, which it could be what our desire is. Our desire is to make it so expensive that no one can ever remove a tree ever again. I mean, that could be our goals here, right? Or it could be that you can only remove it in a very specific instance where it's hazard, which was our code has gotten to. And so I think these are the questions that I think we as a community need to be talking about. These ones right here, as part of for non-development sites. The right of way, to Tim's point, we did update the right of way code. I said most of the century because it is most of the century. I get that it's not sufficient or that people feel like it's not enough. We can keep moving on policy and moving forward. It's just a place to begin. And I would just say that we're put in place investments in this, and I would be remiss if I didn't say this. The trees we have today are because somebody 80 years ago made a commitment to a tree. So I have to step back and say, like, I get a little turned off, like, why are we planting these little trees? That's a commitment in the future. Like we're making, every day we plant trees commitment to 40 years from now. My kids are 11 and 7, right? So I'm committed to planting a lot of trees right now because they're gonna be 70 one day and I won't be here, but I'm not saying like, well, I won't be here when those trees get big enough, so what do I care, right? I'm like, we're getting there. So I think these are just continuing to say like, we're doing what we can. The goal is more trees in our city, not less. And this is kind of a valuable part of the conversation of where there might be some points where we're kind of sticking to. And so just to recap, things I'm hearing from today: trees above a certain size, considerations; heritage trees, considerations; native trees, considerations. Looking at the planning commission, what they came up with, there's things to be thinking about. So this is all really good things for me to be understanding as I go into my IPS committee conversation. So thank you all for taking the time to chat with me. I really appreciate it. And I would encourage you all to, well, I don't need to encourage you. I would imagine you all will be following along on February 12th and 24th and hearing Mike, I guess we can talk through some of this stuff. So thank you all. Thank you, Peter.
So thank you so much, John. To those people on Zoom, I apologize. We couldn't repeat all the questions and we also couldn't get to any questions. But Christina has been writing down the questions and I will work with her to produce sort of a minutes to indicate what questions were asked. We'll also post John's 3 questions on our website and we'll work out, again, through Christina, how we can get feedback from the people in the North End to those 3 questions in case you were unable to give your answers here tonight or to just reaffirm what somebody has already said. So just once again, thank you so much. And we have actually, if you looked at our long-term schedule, I think, I'm not sure if it's August or September, we have another whole meeting devoted on tree issues. So we will be working on that. And one last thing, that meeting on the 12th is, what time is that? The IPS meeting? 4:30 in the afternoon. So we will also post that. So that being said, I don't think there's anything in our outstanding old business or new business unless anybody, like somebody's got a, so thank you so much. Next month, we have the update from the consultant on the Cushman Adams reuse study. And we also have an interesting presentation on the Bayside Trail System. Those of you who live in my part of town, there's been a lot of work done on the trail system down through one of the gullies. And there's the potential of actually connecting that into the city, which is exciting stuff. So hopefully we'll see as many of you next month as we saw this month. Thank you very much.